90,000 people, one stage, one man, and a voice that has not stopped for over 60 years. But behind every performance, behind every sold-out stadium, behind the strut and the swagger, there is a life marked by grief, fracture, and personal tragedy that the world rarely sees. Michael Philip Jagger was born into a middle-class family in Dartford, Kent, on the 26th July, 1943. IMDb. The town sat in the shadow of London, ordinary and working, the kind of place where ambition had to be invented before it could be pursued. His father, Basil Fanshawe Joe Jagger, was a gymnast and physical education teacher who helped popularize basketball in Britain. IMDb. His mother, Eva Ensley Mary, was a hairdresser and a member of the Conservative Party. They were a stable household, structured, academic, rooted in respectability. Nothing about them suggested they would raise one of the most disruptive forces in the history of popular music. Jagger's mother introduced him to jazz and blues artists when he was just a child. He recalled later in life that he always sang as a child. He was in the church choir and also loved listening to singers on the radio and watching them on television and in the movies. His earliest influences included Buddy Holly, Chuck Berry, Nina Simone, and Elvis Presley. He met his longtime songwriting collaborator, Keith Richards, when they were students at Wentworth Primary School in Dartford in 1951. They were children then, 7 years old. They shared the same streets, the same town, the same hunger for American sounds that seemed to come from another world entirely. Then school tracks diverged, and they lost touch. He bought his first guitar at the age of 14 and started a band called Little Boy Blue and the Blue Boys, inspired by American rhythm and blues E-News. He was building something, though he could not yet have known how large it would become. Raised in a middle-class English family, Michael Philip Jagger attended the London School of Economics, but left without graduating in order to pursue a career in music. That decision, to abandon the safe trajectory, to bet everything on music, was the first of many gambles that would define his life. The reunion that changed everything happened by chance. Jagger reunited with Richards in 1961, after the pair had met accidentally at a train station in Kent, Television Academy. Jagger was carrying a stack of blues records under his arm. Richards noticed the names. A conversation began, and the course of rock history shifted. Jagger and Richards bonded over their mutual admiration for artists like Muddy Waters and Chuck Berry. ABC News. They began rehearsing together, writing together, dreaming together. They joined a loose ensemble at the Ealing Club in London. There they met a guitarist named Brian Jones. Their first appearance, under the name the Rolling Stones, after one of their favorite Muddy Waters songs, was performed at the Marquee Club, a London jazz club, on July 12, 1962. IMDb. The name would change. The ambition would not. In 1962, Jagger and Richards teamed up with Brian Jones, Charlie Watts, and Bill Wyman to form the Rolling Stones ABC News. They played covers of rhythm and blues songs in small clubs, often borrowing equipment, playing for little or no money. But the energy in the room was unmistakable. London noticed. The Stones released their first album, The Rolling Stones, in 1964, and reached number 1 in 1965 with The Last Time and I Can't Get No Satisfaction, E-News. That second single, a riff born from Keith Richards waking up in the middle of the night, became more than a hit. It became a generational declaration. The band's first number 1 hit, another original written by Jagger and Richards, also charted in 1965. Television Academy. The song's rebellious energy contrasted sharply with the polished image of the Beatles, establishing the Stones as the counterweight to Beatlemania. Darker, rawer, more dangerous. By the mid-1960s, the Rolling Stones were among the most commercially successful acts in the world. But success, at that velocity, exacts a cost, and Jagger would learn this in ways that would take decades to fully understand. By 1967, Jagger, Richards, and Brian Jones were embroiled in legal troubles over their recreational drug use. AOL, a British tabloid, ran a story accusing Jagger of drug possession, though the reporter had mistakenly confused him with Jones. The charges were eventually overturned, but the arrests, the trials, and the headlines fused the Rolling Stones' identity with danger and transgression in ways that could never be entirely separated from the music. In 1969, the band suffered its first true tragedy. Brian Jones, founding member, guitarist, the original architect of their sound, was found dead at the bottom of his swimming pool on the 3rd of July, 1969. He was 27 years old. The official verdict was death by misadventure. The circumstances remained disputed for decades. The Rolling Stones paid tribute to Jones with a concert at Hyde Park on July 5, 1969, which marked their first performance with new guitarist Mick Taylor. Jagger read a poem by Percy Bysshe Shelley and released thousands of butterflies in Jones's memory. AOL. 2 days after Jones died, the show went on. It always went on. 5 months later came Altamont. In December 1969, the Rolling Stones headlined a free concert at the Altamont Speedway in California. The Hells Angels had been hired as security. Over the course of the day, several people were beaten. One man, Meredith Hunter, was stabbed and killed near the stage during the band's set. The footage was later documented in the film Gimme Shelter. It is one of the most disturbing artifacts in rock history, not because of what it says about the Rolling Stones, but because of what it revealed about the limits of the culture that had gathered in their name. What had been presented as liberation had a violent undercurrent. Altamont became the symbolic end of the idealism of the 1960s. Throughout the 1970s, the Rolling Stones made thousands of live performances and achieved endless record sales. The albums came in a sustained wave of creative output. Sticky Fingers in 1971, Exile on Main Street in 1972, widely considered their masterpiece, recorded in the basement of a rented villa in the south of France while the band lived in a state of near chaos. Goat's Head Soup in 1973, It's Only Rock and Roll in 1974, Black and Blue in 1976. But underneath the recording and the touring, fractures were forming. As a member of the Rolling Stones, and as a solo artist, he reached #1 on the UK and US singles charts with 13 singles, the top 10 with 32 singles, and the top 40 with 70 singles. The scale of the operation was staggering, and it required Jagger to be simultaneously the frontman, the business strategist, the public face, and the creative engine of the biggest rock band on earth. Mick Jagger's personal life has been as public and as turbulent as his professional one. He has had several high-profile romances throughout his life, including those with singer Marianne Faithfull, model Jerry Hall, future French First Lady Carla Bruni, and stylist Loren Scott. He has only been married once, and that was to Bianca Perez Mora Macias from 1971 to 1978. They married in Saint-Tropez, France in May 1971. The ceremony was chaotic. Their daughter, Jade Jagger, was born later that year. Mick and Bianca divorced in 1978 after she discovered he was having an affair with model Jerry Hall. Devereux Octavian Basil Jagger, born in 2016, to Jagger and ballet dancer Melanie Hamrick. He has 5 grandchildren and is a great-grandfather, Wikipedia. The relationship that many close to Jagger describe as the most privately significant of his adult life began in 2001. Jagger met Loren Scott at the Belle Epoque restaurant Le Train Bleu in Paris in 2001. KTLA. Scott was a fashion designer and former model of exceptional talent, working with clients including Madonna, Julia Roberts, Sarah Jessica Parker, Oprah Winfrey, and Nicole Kidman. She was 6'3", elegant, private, and formidably skilled. At her memorial service, Jagger recalled that he was immediately enchanted by this tall, beautiful, and enigmatic woman. Scott insisted they keep the relationship secret for 3 years to avoid public scrutiny. E! News. For the years they were together, Scott designed Jagger's stage costumes for Rolling Stones tours. A gorilla coat covered in ostrich feathers, a jacket she named Glamouflage, an embroidered gold jacket inspired by Gustav Klimt. Their creative and personal lives were intertwined. But beneath the surface, Scott's fashion business was in serious financial difficulty. Her London company had accumulated millions in debt. She was planning to close her label, and she had been suffering from depression. Scott was found dead by her assistant at her apartment in the Chelsea neighborhood of Manhattan on March 17, 2014. E! News. She was 49 years old. The cause of death was determined to be suicide by hanging. At the time, Jagger was on tour with the Rolling Stones in Australia and issued a statement saying he was completely shocked and devastated by the loss. Wikipedia. The Australian leg of the tour was cancelled immediately. Jagger traveled to be with his family. He said he was still struggling to understand how his lover and best friend could end her life in this tragic way. NPR. His daughter Georgia wrote publicly that she missed Loren so much and was so sad she was not there anymore, describing her as such a big part of her life and a part of their family. Jagger paid tribute to Scott by establishing a scholarship in her name for fashion students at Central St. Martin's University in London. L. He performed the cover of Bob Dylan's Just Like a Woman at her memorial service. Scott left her entire estate, estimated at $9 million, to Jagger E! News. In March 2019, news emerged that would make headlines around the world. The Rolling Stones were scheduled to begin the North American leg of their No Filter tour. The shows were canceled. Mick Jagger needed urgent medical attention. Jagger underwent successful heart valve replacement surgery in New York after postponing the Rolling Stones United States tour, TMZ. The procedure he required was a transcatheter aortic valve replacement, known as TAVR. The aortic valve is the main valve blood goes through to leave the heart. In some people, that valve can become tight over time, meaning that it does not open as well, making it more difficult for blood to flow through. This is known as aortic valve stenosis, WCAX. For a performer of Jagger's physical demands, a man who runs the equivalent of miles across a stage every single night, aortic stenosis is not merely a health inconvenience. It is an existential threat to everything his career requires. Jagger maintains a healthy, organic diet, jogs up to 8 miles a day, and also participates in activities like cycling, yoga, and meditation. His physical conditioning at age 75 was the reason his recovery was as rapid as it was. Before surgery, Jagger posted a public statement. He wrote he was so sorry to all his fans in America and Canada with tickets, that he really hated letting them down. He was devastated to have to postpone the tour, but would be working very hard to be back on stage as soon as he could. He was out of the hospital in days and was able to return to rehearsal and touring just weeks after the TAVR. KTLA. Less than 2 months after surgery, Jagger posted a video of himself practicing energetic dance moves in a studio. The No Filter tour resumed in July 2019 at Soldier Field in Chicago in front of 60,000 people. Jagger's younger brother Chris said that Mick is doing okay and is lucky to be alive after a scan revealed that he had a heart condition similar to one that killed the Clash star Joe Strummer. Wikipedia. The weight of that comparison was not lost on anyone in the music world. The history of the Rolling Stones is also the history of a relationship between two men, Mick Jagger and Keith Richards, that has survived more than 6 decades of creative tension, commercial pressure, personal conflict, and occasional near collapse. During 1983, the Rolling Stones recorded the album Undercover, but recording sessions didn't go well as Mick and Keith Richards were having arguments about the kind of music the group should be playing. The disagreements escalated through the mid-1980s into a public and bitter estrangement. Amid simmering tensions with the Rolling Stones, Jagger released his first solo record, She's the Boss, in 1985. The album reached number 6 on the UK album chart and number 13 in the United States Television Academy. Richards was publicly furious. He did not want Jagger to pursue a solo career. He wanted the band. Jagger released a second album, Primitive Cool, in 1986. It underperformed commercially. Mick accepted the fact that the only way to carry on with success was to get back with the Rolling Stones. So in January 1989, he and Keith Richards reformed and wrote songs for what was to be the Steel Wheels album. GGPAA. The reconciliation held. The band embarked on the Steel Wheels World Tour, one of the largest and most commercially successful concert tours in history at that point. The rifts were papered over, if never entirely resolved. Then came the loss that reshaped the band's identity most profoundly. Charlie Watts, the Rolling Stones drummer for nearly 6 decades, died on August 24, 2021. He was 80 years old. Watts had been with the band since 1963. He was the quiet center of the operation, understated, elegant, and irreplaceable. Jagger posted in tribute that he was deeply saddened to hear of the passing of his dear friend and fellow Rolling Stone, Charlie Watts. He was a great friend, a talented musician, and had been the greatest rock and roll drummer to him for over 50 years. The band did not disband. They released Hackney Diamonds in 2023, their first album of original material in 18 years. The record featured a guest appearance by Paul McCartney, contributions from Lady Gaga, and vocals from the late Charlie Watts on one track, preserved from earlier sessions. It charted in the top 5 in multiple countries. In 2003, Jagger was knighted for his services to popular music, IMDb. In 1989, Jagger was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and in 2004, into the UK Music Hall of Fame with the Rolling Stones, IMDb. Jagger won a Golden Globe Award for Best Original Song for Old Habits Die Hard, featured on the soundtrack of Alfie in 2004. Yahoo! In a 1972 interview with Dick Cavett, a then 29-year-old Mick Jagger was asked if he could picture himself doing what he does on stage at the age of 60. Jagger's response was, "Yeah, easily." Cavett's reply was an incredulous, "Really?" But the rocker didn't waver. Hello Magazine. What followed that interview was not just longevity. It was a life that accumulated losses in proportion to its achievements. Brian Jones, Altamont, the estrangement from Richards, the death of Loren Scott, the death of Charlie Watts, a heart that required surgery at 75, a personal life measured in 8 children, 1 marriage, and decades of public scrutiny. Jagger told the Sunday Times in 2022 that he takes training for the stage seriously, and his workouts include 6 weeks of practice even before rehearsals start, and that his practices include dancing, gym, and every day of the week. Hello Magazine. He added that he does not enjoy it very much, but it has to be done. He has said that rock and roll was not supposed to be done when you were in your 70s. It was not designed for that. Doing anything high energy at this age is really pushing it. But that makes it even more challenging, and it has to be as full-on as possible. Jagger and Melanie Hamrick primarily split their time between a townhouse in the Chelsea neighborhood of London and a chateau on the Loire River in France. Wikipedia. Their son, Devereaux, was born in 2016. At the time of writing, Mick Jagger is 82 years old. He remains active. The statues of Mick Jagger and Keith Richards that were unveiled in Dartford in 2023 stand near the train station where 2 boys carrying blues records accidentally met in 1961. The town that produced them has claimed them back in bronze, which is what towns do when they realize what they had. The tragedy of Mick Jagger is not the kind that ends careers. It is the kind that accumulates quietly inside a very long and very public life. Behind every stadium performance, there was grief. Behind the swagger, there was loss. Behind the greatest rock and roll frontman of all time, there was a man from Dartford who was just trying to keep going. And for over 60 years, he has. He has fathered 8 children with 5 different women. He has buried a lover. He has buried a bandmate. He has had his heart operated on at 75. His one attempt at marriage was declared legally void by a British court. And tonight, at age 81, he is still on stage. This is not the story of the Rolling Stones. This is the story of the man behind them, and everything that story cost. Michael Philip Jagger was born on July 26, 1943, in Dartford, Kent, a town unremarkable by every measure except one. It produced him. His father, Basil Fanshawe Joe Jagger, was a gymnast and physical education teacher who helped popularize basketball in Britain. His mother, Eva, worked as a hairdresser. They were a stable, respectable, middle-class household. Nothing about the Jagger family suggested revolution. But music arrived early. Jagger later recalled that he always sang as a child. He was in the church choir. He listened to singers on the radio. He watched them on television. And when American rhythm and blues made its way across the Atlantic, carried in the grooves of records that cost more than most boys his age could afford, something ignited in him that was not going to be managed by respectability or stability. He met Keith Richards at Wentworth Primary School in Dartford in 1951. They were 7 years old. They lost touch when their school paths diverged. Then, in 1961, they met again by accident at a train station in Kent. Jagger was carrying a stack of American blues records under his arm. Richards saw the names on the covers. A conversation began, and within a year, both of them were playing the Marquee Club in London under a name borrowed from a Muddy Waters song, the Rolling Stones. Jagger had enrolled at the London School of Economics, Yahoo, in 1960. He was headed, on paper, toward a career in business, finance, or law. He left without graduating to pursue music full-time. It was the first major gamble of his life. It would not be the last. The Rolling Stones have sold more than 200 million records worldwide. IMDb. From 1989 to 2001 alone, according to Fortune magazine, the Stones generated more than $1.5 billion in total gross revenue, surpassing U2, Bruce Springsteen, and Michael Jackson. Television Academy. Mick Jagger's estimated net worth is $500 million. Yahoo. He earns an estimated $40 million per year from music, touring, and other ventures. Yahoo. In 2018 alone, the band made $117 million from just 14 shows. Yahoo. These numbers describe commercial achievement, but they say nothing about what the life actually contained. By 1971, Mick Jagger was one of the most recognizable human beings on Earth. The Rolling Stones had released Sticky Fingers. They were about to record Exile on Main Street. The band was at the height of its creative powers, and Jagger, at 27, was about to get married for the first and only time. Her name was Bianca Perez Mora Macias. She was Nicaraguan-born, fiercely intelligent, and possessed of a presence that matched his own in a room. They met in Paris in 1970. Their wedding took place in Saint-Tropez, France, in May 1971. The ceremony was chaotic from the start. Press photographers crowded into the church. The registrar threatened to call the whole thing off. Jagger told reporters he found the whole thing embarrassing and the day awful. Bianca reportedly arrived late. The flash of cameras never stopped. Mick and Bianca divorced in 1978 after she discovered he was having an affair with model Jerry Hall. The deterioration of their relationship inspired the Rolling Stones' disco-flavored hit, Miss You. TMZ. Bianca Jagger famously stated their marriage was over on the wedding day. She said this not in bitterness, but with the clarity of someone who had watched the outcome arrive the moment it was supposed to begin. They had one child together. Jade Jagger, born in October 1971, became a jewelry designer and sculptor. She gave Mick Jagger his first grandchildren. She has spoken publicly about the complex experience of growing up with two famous parents who did not stay together. After the divorce, Bianca Jagger did not disappear. She transformed. She became a prominent human rights activist and humanitarian. She has worked with Amnesty International, the Council of Europe, and the United Nations. She has testified before the United States Congress on human rights issues. The woman Jagger married became, in many ways, more consequential to the world than the marriage itself. Jerry Hall was born in Gonzales, Texas, on July 2, 1956. She began modeling in the 1970s and became one of the most sought-after models in the world. She transitioned into acting, appearing in the 1989 film Batman NPR. By the mid-1970s, she was one of the most photographed women in the world. She was engaged to Roxy Music frontman Bryan Ferry when she met Jagger. Jagger invited Hall and Ferry, a fellow musician, over for dinner in London one night. Hall wrote in her autobiography that Bryan was flattered by Mick's attention, but he could also see that Mick was smitten with her Wikipedia. The engagement to Ferry ended, the marriage to Bianca ended, and Jerry Hall and Mick Jagger became one of the defining celebrity couples of the late 1970s and 1980s. Hall helped Jagger kick his drug habit, TMZ, in those early years together. She stabilized something in him, at least for a time. They settled in Richmond, in southwest London. They had 4 children together. Elizabeth Scarlett Jagger was born in 1984. James Leroy Jagger was born in 1985. Georgia May Jagger was born in 1992. Gabriel Luke Jagger was born in 1997. E-News. In November 1990, on a beach in Bali, Indonesia, they had what the world understood to be their wedding. A Hindu priest officiated. The ceremony drew global attention and photographs. They presented themselves publicly as husband and wife. However, the couple had failed to register their marriage as legally required. The High Court in England and Wales later ruled the ceremony was not valid under either Indonesian or English law, and declared it null and void. Hall said she didn't like the idea of annulling after 23 years and 4 children, describing it as seeming a bit rude. But the marriage, legal or not, was already ending before the courts weighed in. Jagger subjected Hall to serial infidelity during their relationship. She kept forgiving him to the point where it wasn't very healthy at all, Wikipedia. She later told the Evening Standard she still loved him, but the relationship had been so unhealthy it left her depressed and unhappy. The final break came in 1999. Brazilian model Luciana Morad was carrying Jagger's child, Wikipedia. Hall filed for what she believed was a divorce. The court declared the Bali ceremony legally void. She received not a divorce, but an annulment, a legal finding that the marriage had never existed in the first place. Lucas Maurice Morad Jagger, Jagger's 7th child, was born in 1999 to Luciana Jimenez Morad. The circumstances of his birth were the direct cause of the dissolution of Jagger's 22-year relationship with Jerry Hall. Reflecting on her relationship with Jagger, Hall said that after their son Gabriel was born, she had had enough of his infidelities. She said, "I thought, right, done that. He's served his purpose." Hall claimed Jagger was a problematic husband, but a good father. He was very good at helping them with their homework. He loves history. He was good at taking them for walks with the dogs. He loves outdoor activities, bike rides, playing cricket. WCAX in Harper's Bazaar in 2019, Hall said, "I had a lot of fun with Mick. The music people were wonderful. We traveled the world. We did so many fun things. But he is who he is, you know. He's a bit of a ladies' lad, isn't he?" E-News Hall later reflected more fully, saying she had no regrets and wouldn't change anything, that she had a wonderful adventure and 4 beautiful children, and that she and Jagger are great friends. TMZ. After Jagger, Hall eventually married media magnate Rupert Murdoch in 2016. Jagger was reportedly left seething when Hall surprised many by marrying the 85-year-old Australian media tycoon. Wikipedia. Their 4 shared children were expected to develop relationships with Murdoch. Hall and Murdoch divorced in 2022. NPR. Mick Jagger has 8 children with 5 different women. Television Academy. The oldest is Karis Hunt Jagger, born in 1970, to writer and actress Marcia Hunt. Karis was born outside of any recognized relationship, when Jagger was still married to Bianca. Jagger initially denied paternity. A DNA test confirmed he was her father. Karis later became a film producer. She has maintained a relatively private life. Jade Jagger, born to Bianca, became a successful jewelry designer. She gave Jagger his first grandchildren and has been vocal about her childhood and family. Elizabeth Scarlett Jagger has worked as a model and actress. James Jagger pursued a career in acting and music. He appeared in the HBO series Vinyl in 2016, playing a role that required him to portray a musician resembling his father. Georgia May Jagger became one of the most successful models of her generation. She has appeared on numerous international magazine covers. Gabriel Jagger worked briefly as a model before transitioning to journalism and eventually launching his own publication, Why Now? He married Swiss socialite Anouk Vinzenried in 2021. Lucas Maurice Morad Jagger, born to Brazilian model Luciana Jimenez, was the child whose conception ended the Jagger-Hall relationship. He grew up primarily in Brazil and has maintained a lower public profile than many of his siblings. And then there is Devereux Octavian Basil Jagger, born December 8, 2016, to ballet dancer Melanie Hamrick. Mick Jagger was 73 years old when his youngest child was born. Jagger admitted that becoming a new dad in his 70s meant you get a bit out of practice, saying it's not like riding a bike. Hamrick described him as a fantastic parent and said she feels as though she has more support from him than some of her married friends get from their husbands. TMZ. Jagger told the Wall Street Journal in 2023 that his children don't need $500 million to live well, joking that they should come on. He indicated the funds should go to charity instead. ABC News. The statement generated significant discussion about inheritance, wealth, and legacy. Jagger and Hamrick continue to have a strong relationship. His 2019 No Filter tour earned $500 million, while Jagger and Hamrick divide their time between New York City and a chateau in France. ABC News. There is one relationship in Mick Jagger's personal life that those close to him describe differently from all the others. One that did not end in divorce, infidelity, or mutual separation. One that ended in a way no one anticipated. Loren Scott was a fashion designer from Roy, Utah. She was 6 feet 3 inches tall. She had worked as a model in Paris in her 20s before turning to design. Her clients included Nicole Kidman, Sarah Jessica Parker, Julia Roberts, Madonna, and Oprah Winfrey. She was one of the most respected designers in the industry, and she was privately, deeply struggling. Jagger met Scott in Paris in 2001. They were together for 13 years. She designed his stage costumes for multiple Rolling Stones tours, an ostrich feather gorilla coat, embroidered gold jackets, a garment she named Glamouflage. Their professional and personal lives were intertwined at every level. What very few people knew was that Scott's fashion business had accumulated millions of dollars in debt. She was preparing to close her label. She had been experiencing depression. On March 17, 2014, Scott was found dead at her apartment in Chelsea, Manhattan. She was 49 years old. The cause of death was suicide. Jagger was in Australia when he received the news. He was on tour with the Rolling Stones. He issued a public statement. He said he was completely shocked and devastated by the loss of his dear friend and companion, Loren Scott. He said he had to take time to come to terms with her death. He said he was still struggling to understand how his lover and best friend could end her life in this tragic way. The Australian leg of the tour was cancelled immediately. Jagger performed a cover of Bob Dylan's Just Like a Woman at her memorial service. He established a scholarship in her name for fashion students at Central St. Martin's University in London. Scott left Jagger her entire $9 million estate in Yahoo. His daughter Georgia wrote publicly that she missed Loren so much and was so sad she was not there anymore, describing her as a big part of her life and a part of their family. The intimacy of that statement revealed what the public rarely got to see: a Mick Jagger who was privately a father and a partner, and who carried grief like anyone else. In March 2019, the Rolling Stones canceled the North American leg of their No Filter tour. The announcement was brief. Jagger needed medical attention. He required heart valve replacement surgery, a transcatheter aortic valve replacement, in New York. The aortic valve had become tight over time, restricting blood flow. For a man who runs the equivalent of miles across a stage every night, who dances and struts and leaps through 2-hour performances, the diagnosis was serious. Jagger posted a statement. He said he was so sorry to all his fans in America and Canada with tickets. He said he really hated letting them down and was devastated to have to postpone the tour. He was out of the hospital within days. Within weeks, he posted a video of himself practicing full dance moves in a rehearsal studio. The tour resumed in July 2019 at Soldier Field in Chicago, in front of 60,000 people. Jagger maintains a healthy, organic diet. He jogs up to 8 miles a day and participates in cycling, yoga, and meditation Yahoo. He has described his pre-tour preparation as 6 weeks of physical training, dancing, gym, activity every single day of the week, before rehearsals even begin. He has said he does not particularly enjoy this regimen, but it has to be done. Billboard has ranked Jagger as the greatest rock lead singer of all time, writing that no one has moves like Jagger, nor the voice, the image, the fashion sense, or the remarkably enduring charisma, and that after so many years, Mick Jagger continues to personify not only the Rolling Stones, but rock and roll itself. Television Academy. As a member of the Rolling Stones and as a solo artist, he has reached number 1 on UK and US singles charts with 13 singles, the top 10 with 32 singles, and the top 40 with 70 singles, IMDb. In 2007, the band grossed $437 million on the A Bigger Bang tour, earning an entry in the Guinness World Records for the most lucrative music tour ever. Television Academy. He was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1989. He received a knighthood for services to music in 2003. He has 5 grandchildren. He is a great-grandfather, and he is 81 years old, still performing in stadiums. The cultural icon described by the world, the strut, the pout, the voice, the rebellion, the swagger, is real. All of it is real. But it coexists with something else. A man who has outlived a lover to suicide, outlived a bandmate of nearly 60 years, outlived 2 marriages, conducted one that a British court declared never legally existed, and fathered a child at 73. CNN has called Jagger's greatest talent, besides strutting and singing, his ability to surround himself and the rest of the band with a group of very able executives. Television Academy. It is a shrewd observation. But there is another talent that goes unmentioned: the capacity to absorb personal loss without stopping, to continue performing when the private life demands something other than performance. In a 1972 interview, a 29-year-old Jagger was asked if he could picture himself doing what he does on stage at age 60. He said yes, easily. The interviewer looked incredulous. What neither of them could have known then was the weight of what that yes would eventually require. Not just the physical discipline, not just the professional endurance, but the willingness to keep going through grief, estrangement, loss, and the slow, ordinary accumulation of time. The tragedy of Mick Jagger is not dramatic in the way that rock tragedies usually are. He did not die young, he did not collapse, he did not flame out. His tragedy is quieter than that. The grief of a very long life lived at full volume, in full public view, with all of its losses intact. And still, the lights come up, and still, he walks out. He was sentenced to prison for possessing 4 pills he had legally purchased in Italy. The country's most respected newspaper came to his defense. A court reversed a conviction, and the episode made him untouchable. This is the story of a man who did not just survive scandal, he was built by it. Before Mick Jagger became the most recognizable frontman in rock history, he was already learning something that would define his public life for 6 decades. That authority existed to be provoked, and that provocation had consequences. As a student at the London School of Economics, a young man named Mick Jagger changed his name to conjure up a little faux Irish, salt-of-the-earth street credibility. His family kept calling him Mike for the rest of their lives, NPR. The name change was small, but it was the first act in a very long performance, the construction of a persona that would spend decades in conflict with established norms. The Rolling Stones formed in London in 1962. They played American rhythm and blues in small clubs. They were loud, unapologetic, and marketed, deliberately, as the dangerous alternative to the Beatles' more palatable image. Where the Beatles smiled for cameras, the Stones scowled. Where the Beatles wore matching suits, the Stones wore what they liked. By 1965, the band was generating enormous commercial success. Satisfaction had topped charts on both sides of the Atlantic. They were playing to thousands of people every night, and on one unremarkable evening that year, Jagger, along with other members of the band, stopped at a petrol station in East London and asked to use the toilet. The owner refused. They urinated on the station wall. They were reported. They were taken to court. They were fined £5 each for insulting behavior. Jagger told the magistrate, "We pee anywhere, man." It was a minor incident, but it was early evidence of a pattern, Jagger's refusal to adjust his behavior to accommodate conventional expectations, and the authorities' repeated determination to make an example of him. The petrol station incident was forgotten quickly. What followed in 1967 was not. Part 2. Redlands. The raid that defined a generation. 4 to 9. In February 1967, the British tabloid The News of the World ran a 3-part series entitled Pop Stars and Drugs, Facts That Will Shock You. The series claimed, among other things, that Mick Jagger had been witnessed taking drugs at a London nightclub. The article had targeted the Rolling Stones, and a reporter had spent an evening at the exclusive London club Blazes, where a member of the Rolling Stones allegedly took several Benzedrine tablets and displayed a piece of hashish CNN. The reporter claimed this was Jagger. It turned out to be a case of mistaken identity. The reporter had been eavesdropping on Brian Jones, CNN. Jagger sued the News of the World for libel. The newspaper, faced with losing the case, struck back. On the evening of February 12, 1967, West Sussex police arrived at Keith Richards' home, Redlands, in West Wittering. Inside, Richards and his guests, including Jagger, Marianne Faithfull, art dealer Robert Fraser, and an American acid dealer known as David Schneiderman, had spent the day taking LSD. They were relaxed, listening to music, oblivious to the police gathering outside E! News. When the police searched the home, they found a naked woman, Marianne Faithfull, who was wrapped in a fur rug, fresh from taking a shower. One individual identified only as Mr. X, 4 pep pills, and Robert Fraser in possession of heroin tablets KTLA. No arrests were made that night, but the wheels had been set in motion. At the trial at West Sussex Quarter Sessions, Jagger stood charged with illegal possession of 4 amphetamine tablets he had purchased in Italy. Richards faced the more serious charge of allowing his house to be used for the purpose of smoking cannabis IMDb. In testimony, a doctor confirmed he had given Jagger a prescription for the tablets, which Jagger had legally purchased overseas. The defense argued strenuously. The jury was unmoved. Jagger was found guilty for possession of the pills, fined £100, and sentenced to 3 months in jail. Richards was found guilty of allowing people to smoke hashish in his home, fined £500, and sentenced to 1 year in jail. Fraser was found guilty of possession of heroin, fined £200, and sentenced to 6 months. Richards spent the night at Wormwood Scrubs. Jagger and Fraser went to Brixton Jail. Wikipedia. The reaction from the British public was immediate and, for the establishment, unexpected. A huge popular campaign took shape, with bands such as The Who putting out statements and cover versions of Rolling Stones tracks in solidarity. Wikipedia. Then something remarkable happened. The Times, traditionally one of Britain's most conservative newspapers, published an editorial by its editor, William Rees-Mogg. The headline referenced an Alexander Pope poem, Who Breaks a Butterfly on a Wheel? The editorial asked whether Mr. Jagger had received the same treatment as he would have received if he were not a famous figure, NPR. Rees-Mogg argued there must remain a suspicion that Jagger received a more severe sentence than would have been thought proper for any purely anonymous young man. Wikipedia. The editorial was widely read. It shifted public opinion. On July 31st, 1967, Lord Parker, the Lord Chief Justice of the London Appeal Court, dismissed the charges against Richards and granted Jagger a conditional discharge, KTLA. Only Fraser went to prison. During the one night Jagger spent in jail awaiting appeal, he wrote the lyrics for the song 2,000 Light Years from Home, WCAX. The tabloid that had started this chain of events had miscalculated badly. Instead of destroying the Rolling Stones, it had transformed them into symbols of an entire generation's conflict with authority. The incident underscored the growing conflict between the counterculture and the authorities, symbolizing the generational divide of the era. For the Rolling Stones, the ordeal solidified their image as rock and roll outlaws. Irish Examiner. Richards later claimed, "The judge managed to turn me into some folk hero overnight." Wikipedia. Of all the stories generated by the Redlands raid, one proved more durable than any other, and none was more demonstrably false. Tabloid newspapers began circulating a story that police had found Jagger's girlfriend, Marianne Faithfull, in a compromising position with a Mars bar. The story was published without a single named source. No police report mentioned it. No witness confirmed it. Faithfull herself addressed the rumor directly in 1987. She stated she just sat there in her fur rug with no Mars bar. She said it is a folk legend, and if people want to believe that when the cops walked in there was this incredible orgy going on, they will. But to get it straight, WCAX. Faithfull later described the Mars bar story as a piece of vicious, deliberately sexualized tabloid invention, designed not merely to shock, but to humiliate and dehumanize a young woman whose primary offense, in the view of that particular press apparatus, was being present in the room. The story has been circulated and repeated for nearly 6 decades, despite its complete lack of evidential basis. Faithfull denied it on multiple occasions over the course of her life. Jagger denied it. No corroborating documentation has ever emerged. What the story accomplished, and this is its true cultural function, was to attach a permanent image of sexual transgression to the Redlands incident that no legal outcome could entirely erase. The law exonerated Jagger. The tabloids ensured the mythology outlasted the verdict. On December 6, 1969, the Rolling Stones headlined a free concert at Altamont Speedway in Northern California. The event was intended as a West Coast equivalent of Woodstock, a celebration of the counterculture, a gift to the fans. It became something else entirely. The Hells Angels Motorcycle Club had been engaged to serve as security for the event, reportedly in exchange for beer. As the day progressed, violence broke out repeatedly. Audience members were beaten. The atmosphere deteriorated with each passing hour. During the Rolling Stones set, an 18-year-old man named Meredith Hunter was stabbed and killed near the stage by Hells Angels members. Hunter had been brandishing a revolver. The sequence of events was captured on film by documentary filmmakers Albert and David Maysles, and later released as the concert film Gimme Shelter. The film shows Jagger watching the footage in an editing suite, visibly shaken, asking to see it again. The expression on his face is not one of a performer reviewing his work. It is the expression of someone watching a decision unfold into catastrophe. Altamont generated extensive coverage and analysis. Critics argued the Rolling Stones bore responsibility for the security arrangements. Others noted the event was organized rapidly, with insufficient planning, and that the violence was carried out by others, not by the band. The debate over culpability continued for years. What Altamont represented culturally was something larger than the question of individual blame. The 1960s had generated an enormous mythology about the transformative power of rock music, that concerts were sacred gatherings, that the counterculture was fundamentally peaceful, that the music could transcend social divisions. Altamont exposed the limits of all of this. A man died at a rock concert. The cameras were rolling, and there was no mythology large enough to contain what they recorded. Jagger has rarely discussed Altamont at length in public. He has acknowledged the tragedy. He has not offered elaborate justifications. The film Gimme Shelter remains the most complete documentary record of what occurred, and what it showed was sufficient. In the early 1970s, two of the most influential figures in British rock music, Mick Jagger and David Bowie, developed a close and widely observed relationship. They attended each other's concerts. They were photographed together regularly. They were seen at the same parties, in the same nightclubs, at the same ringside seats. In 1990, Angie Bowie, David Bowie's first wife, appeared on the Joan Rivers show. She stated that she walked in on the two rockers naked in bed together. Yahoo! The claim generated immediate and sustained tabloid attention. She reiterated the account in her 1993 memoir, Backstage Passes. Jagger was quick to dismiss the whole thing as complete rubbish. A public letter from David Bowie's lawyer stated that any implication that there was ever a gay affair between Mick Jagger and David Bowie was an absolute fabrication. Hello magazine. Angie Bowie subsequently clarified her account on multiple occasions. She stated she certainly did not catch anyone in the act. All she found were two people sleeping in her bed. They happened to be naked, and they happened to be Mick Jagger and David Bowie. Several months later, she was dismissing the story as old news and claiming the two men were only passed out in bed. GGPAA. In her own words, she described what was more likely a drunken, exhausted collapse than anything else. Angie Bowie told NME, "I walked into the bedroom, and David was there with all these pillows and duvets on top of him, and on the other side of the bed was Mick's leg sticking out. I said, 'Did you guys have a good night?' They were so hungover they could hardly speak." Television Academy. Bebe Buell, mother of Liv Tyler and former lover of both Jagger and Bowie, directly disputed the accounts in Christopher Anderson's Biography on Facebook, calling the Bowie and Jagger situation completely stupid and false. AOL. The story has persisted because it intersects with genuine questions about sexuality, identity, and the boundaries of rock culture in the 1970s. Both Jagger and Bowie occupied spaces in the culture that deliberately blurred conventional categories. Bowie was openly bisexual. Jagger consistently declined to be categorized. The ambiguity was, for both of them, partly deliberate. In the absence of confirmation or clear denial that satisfied everyone, the story became self-sustaining. What is documented is that Jagger and Bowie were genuinely close for a period. What is also documented is that neither man confirmed a sexual relationship. The testimony that drove the story was later qualified repeatedly by the person who gave it. In March 1977, the Rolling Stones came to Toronto to record a live album at the El Mocambo Club. The trip was eventful before it began. Keith Richards had brought his son and his common-law wife along with him, as well as her 28 pieces of luggage. Inside those bags, customs officials found 10 grams of hashish and a spoon coated with traces of heroin. Her arrest was shortly followed by Richards' Wikipedia. Richards faced a serious narcotics charge that would take years to resolve. In that context, with their guitarist under arrest, their tour in jeopardy, the Rolling Stones played the El Mocambo. And among those in the audience that night was Margaret Trudeau, wife of Canadian Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau. Margaret Trudeau spent her 6th wedding anniversary without her Prime Minister husband, instead partying with the Rolling Stones at a Toronto nightclub and later in Mick Jagger's limousine. Wikipedia. Pierre Trudeau was in Ottawa. Margaret Trudeau was climbing out of Jagger's car outside the El Mocambo. The photograph ran in newspapers across Canada and internationally. Even Charlie Watts admitted, "I wouldn't want my wife associating with us." Jagger was shocked at the sex rumors, dismissing them as insulting to me and insulting to her NPR. She talked about that night later on and explained her side of the story. It was true that she went out with the band that night when she ran into Ronnie Wood in a hotel. She bonded with the band over drinking and smoking, but the next day she left and never saw them again. IMDb. She spoke at a mental health conference in 2008 and still denied the affair. Margaret also stated that even though she didn't, she wished that she had actually slept with every single member, back at the time L. Her precise words at that conference were, "Unfortunately, when I look back on it now, I think I should have slept with every single one of them. I should have had so much fun, but I didn't." Margaret Trudeau was later diagnosed with bipolar disorder, she became a mental health advocate. In later life, she reflected that her behavior during that period was the expression of a serious, undiagnosed condition, not simply counterculture excitement. Years later, during a Rolling Stones concert in Vancouver, Jagger said from the stage, "We love your Mr. Trudeau." When the audience booed, he added, "I mean, his family has always been such big fans of our band." E-News. The line drew laughter. Jagger had turned a 50-year-old international scandal into a stage punchline. Throughout Jagger's career, several Rolling Stones recordings generated significant criticism for their subject matter. The debates around these songs reflect broader questions about the relationship between artistic expression and social responsibility. Brown Sugar, released in 1971, addresses themes of slavery, violence, and interracial sex during the American antebellum period. The song became one of the band's most recognizable tracks. It also generated sustained criticism. In 2021, the Rolling Stones quietly stopped performing Brown Sugar on the No Filter tour. Jagger stated the band was thinking about it, and a lot of people in America had issues with the words. Stray Cat Blues, from the 1968 album Beggar's Banquet, contains a lyric referencing a 15-year-old girl. The Some Girls album of 1978 generated accusations of racism and sexism from multiple communities. Reverend Jesse Jackson publicly called for a boycott of the album. The Rolling Stones record label asked the band to modify certain tracks. In a 1978 interview following the Some Girls controversy, Jagger responded to the accusations in characteristically provocative terms. He stated the song was addressed to everyone who needed to be uptight about it. He characterized the outrage as fundamentally misplaced, arguing that the record was satirical and that critics lacked the sophistication to recognize the distinction. The response deepened the controversy rather than resolving it. The songs remained on the record. The debates around them continued for decades. What these controversies illuminate is a persistent tension in Jagger's career between his claim to artistic license and the real-world effects of that license on how audiences engaged with his work. The Rolling Stones positioned themselves as outsiders looking in on American culture, commenting on its hypocrisies and excesses. Critics argued they were reinforcing rather than examining the behaviors they depicted. The debate was never resolved to everyone's satisfaction, which is, arguably, part of why it continued. In 2003, Mick Jagger was awarded a knighthood for services to popular music. The announcement generated considerable commentary, and not merely from those who considered the honor inappropriate given his history of drug arrests and public controversy. Keith Richards was vocally opposed. He stated that any music-based knighthood should go to the band, not to an individual member, and that Jagger's willingness to accept it was at odds with everything the Rolling Stones had represented for 40 years. Richards later said publicly that the whole thing made him want to throw up. Jagger accepted the honor. He attended Buckingham Palace. He received his knighthood from Prince Charles, as the Queen was absent that day. The claim in the source material provided that Queen Elizabeth II repeatedly blocked Jagger's knighthood, and that she scheduled knee surgery specifically to avoid conducting the ceremony in 2003, requires the same standard of factual accuracy applied throughout this documentary. The public record confirms only that Prince Charles conducted the investiture on the day. No verified documentary evidence supports the claim that the Queen's absence was a deliberate act of personal disapproval toward Jagger specifically. What is documented is that the knighthood was controversial. What is documented is that Richards publicly rejected both the honor and the decision. And what is documented is that Mick Jagger, a man who had been arrested, tried, and briefly imprisoned for possessing 4 tablets he had legally purchased overseas 36 years earlier, walked into Buckingham Palace and was addressed as Sir Michael. The arc of that journey, from Brixton Jail to the palace, from public enemy to knight, is, in itself, a kind of commentary on everything the 1967 trial had revealed about the nature of establishment authority in Britain. The same culture that had sought to make an example of him had eventually chosen to honor him instead. In the summer of 2019, less than 2 months after heart surgery, Mick Jagger posted a video of himself dancing in a rehearsal studio. The No Filter tour resumed at Soldier Field in Chicago. 60,000 people were there. He was 75 years old. The scandals documented here did not diminish him. In many cases, they amplified him. The Redlands bust made him a symbol. Altamont tested him. The controversies around his music ensured he was never merely comfortable. The personal stories attached to his name, true, partially true, and invented, ensured he remained perpetually discussed. Keith Richards famously described Jagger by saying, "He's a nice bunch of guys, NPR." It is a line that captures something important, that the Mick Jagger of public life has never been a single, stable person. He has been the defiant teenager, the jailed rock star, the lyricist accused of misogyny, the figure at the center of international scandals, the man dancing in a rehearsal room at 75 after having his heart operated on, and the man who walked out onto a stage in front of 90,000 people and made all of it look effortless. The tragedy of Mick Jagger, if there is one, is not a single event. It is the accumulation, the losses, the grief carried quietly inside a life that has never been allowed to be quiet. Brian Jones, Altamont, Loren Scott, Charlie Watts. A heart that required intervention at 75. And beneath all of it, a boy from Dartford who changed his name, left the London School of Economics, picked up some records, and decided to bet everything on a sound he heard coming from America. He is still collecting on that bet.